Up a little bit on last week's lesson with just one more observation. When it comes to the matter of disciplining a child, Dad and Mom must agree. They have to agree. Now, let me say this, and some of y'all may get a little bent out of shape by it, but that's okay. You'll get back in shape. Little children, and I don't know how they learn this, but little children know how to play mom against dad and dad against mom. They know how to get their way. And if one parent is going to discipline, the other needs to stand there and watch it. You need a witness. I didn't kill him. No, he died on his own. That's what happened. But they will pick up very quickly on who is the disciplinarian and who is not. Now let me reiterate again. If Dad is present, he needs to do the disciplining. And especially if you have a daughter. Because mamas are harder on daughters than dads are. They've got us wrapped around their finger. Are y'all hearing what I'm saying? So what they will do, they will somehow work it to where Dad stands up for them and Mom won't discipline. They hope. I told y'all this, years ago, but we were still on the road in revival work. And I came home from being out with the preacher visiting and got there and Virginia said, you need to spank Bonda. I said, okay. What'd she do? She told me she needed to spank him. I just didn't want to be the one to do it. Are y'all hearing what I'm saying? So I took her to the back of the fifth wheel, shut the doors. We stayed in there for a while, and I came out. And Virginia was standing at the kitchen getting dinner ready, and she said, I didn't hear her cry. I said, well, we talked, and she told me she wouldn't do that again. She said, you get in there and spank her. I said, if you want her spanked so bad, you go do it. But I went back in there because I knew that I had to do it, but I made her come in and watch it. And the reason is there needs to be a concerted front, a strong front. And when you're spanking your child, and let me again say, spanking is what you do when you have tried everything else. You've hung that last dog and he's still barking. You then take the rod or the paddle or the belt. That's what I used. My wife used a paddle. But you have to stand there. If your wife is spanking, then you need to be there supporting. And when they look up at you with those teary eyes, you say, no. No, I agree with Mama. I agree with Daddy. Now, folk, listen to me. That's not easy. But you always remember the discipline is not for you. It is to bring about that peaceable fruit of righteousness. I've used a story about wind. And by the way, I don't know why, but Wynn has always had a tender heart. And he still does. He's like his mother. I'm telling you, Vonda was like me, or is like me. But Wynn, he got over this, but he was a cute baby. He outgrew the cuteness. But we were home for Christmas, and this was back before throwaway diapers. You had big cloth diapers with the pins, and you got vaccinated every time you changed a diaper. And, I was always afraid that somebody'd see one of his diapers after I changed it, and there's blood on it, and they think it was his. When it was mine, they'd arrest me and put me in jail. But Wynn was at that waddly stage, walking, and that big diaper, it was cute. And we were there at the Oden's house, and Wynn did something, and Virginia corrected him. And he turned around and looked at her and put his hands on his hip, and he said, "No!" That was the cutest thing I had ever seen in my life. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. But before our children were born, Virginia and I made a vow to each other and to our Lord we were not going to raise a hellion. And he had already been taught, trained, you don't tell your mother or your daddy no. So I picked him up, took him to the back bedroom, took his diaper off, because all it did was make noise if you spanked him on the diaper. And I spanked him, and he was screaming like a wild Comanche Indian. And his great-grandmother, Virginia's grandmother, came back there, heard him crying. She said, "Tell Daddy no." I looked at her. I said, "You better pray God he doesn't say what you just said." "Why?" I said, "Because he'll get another spanking. And then I'm going to whip you." She looked at me and said, "You wouldn't dare." I said, "You better pray to God he doesn't say that." Well, in a minute, my wife came down there and she said, "What did you say to Grandma?" I said, I told her. She said, "Oh, good, thank you." She went back in there and she told her grandma, "Grandmother said, we love you. Don't ever interfere when we're disciplined or loving on our children. That's between us and them, not you. You had your chance with Mama. Now you give us our chance with our." Never had another problem out of Grandma Sparks. Never had one. Never had a problem out of the Odens. I was hoping Miss Oden would say something sometime, but she never would. But when it comes to the discipline, you have to be in agreement on it, because they will play you one against another. I promise you this. Let's suppose that Dad really doesn't want, well, I shouldn't say, don't say doesn't want to. No parent ought to want to spank their child. But let's say Dad just says, "I'm not going to do it," and he never does. Well, when Mom starts to spank that child, you watch it. They'll do their best to run to Daddy. But let me tell you something. This is after 55 years of helping couples in the ministry. Do you know who, when they get older, they're going to have the greatest respect for? The one who disciplined them. The one who disciplined them. Why? You cannot really love your child if you don't discipline them. And they know, somehow in their DNA makeup, they know that you love them. They don't think you do if you don't discipline them. Okay, that's it for last time. Now, I've got to hurry, but I'm going to share with you 7 ways, very quickly. I want you to write these down if you can. If not, we can make a copy of the video, or you can go back and look at it. I want to teach you 7 ways to be very sure that your child will become a rebel. Not where they'll become obedient. I'm going to teach you 7 reasons why your child, I guarantee you, will turn out to be a rebel. I wish you could sit on my side of the desk and listen to parents with broken hearts because their child is a rebel. Now, please understand, all children, I don't care who they are, all children have moments or seasons when they struggle with obedience. They all do. Matter of fact, they get that from you. Because if you think back, you had times in your life when you struggled with obedience. But some children, particularly in their teenage years, become defiant. They become overly disrespectful. Why? Well, I think there are a lot of reasons we could talk about that contribute to this type of a problem. But one of the main factors is that all of us, from the time we're born till the time we die, we have a free will. We can choose to obey or we can choose to disobey. Now here's the amazing thing. You've probably heard me say this before. God, in all of His power, has so chosen He will not violate your will. He won't do that. Now, I can guarantee you this. If you're a child of God, He can make you wish you had obeyed. But He won't make you obey. There are repercussions for our actions and our choices. Now, notice Romans chapter 13. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. What does that mean, higher powers? That means governing authority. In the home, who is supposed to govern the home? Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad. Not the children. Are y'all here? So he says, let every soul be subject to higher powers, for there is no power or authority but of God, the authorities that be or ordained or ordered by God. Now what's this? Whosoever therefore resisteth the authority, the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation or God's judgment. So we somehow have to train our children to have the obedience and respect for authority. You don't have to be around a child very long, and you can find out whether or not they obey mom and dad at home. Y'all hearing what I'm saying? They don't have to tell us. We just watch them. We listen to them. And it seems like that no matter at times whatever amount of discipline and example that we as parents and leaders give, if you are also participating in these things I'm going to talk about tonight, you're going to undermine your own influence over your children. Let me quickly go through these. Number one, when they hear parents criticize authority, it tears your authority down over them. Don't talk in a negative way about your boss or your co-workers in front of your children. Don't do that. I've often said it this way. Don't have roast preacher for lunch in front of your children. Did you hear what the preacher said this morning? I don't agree with what the preacher said. Don't ever do that in front of your children. Matter of fact, don't do it in front of anybody except the preacher. You ought to come tell me about it if you don't agree. Don't take sides with your child against their teachers or their coaches. I've used this story before, but very quickly. When my wife was teaching 5th grade, I think back then we were on a 6-week grading period. And she went in to average her grades. And Brother Travis, she could tell where one of her little girls in her 5th grade class had gotten the grade book and changed her grade. Well, my wife didn't embarrass the little girl in front of the class. She just called and made an appointment with the mother. The mother came up. Virginia talked to her, showed her what was going on. Here's what the mother said. Why did you have the grade book where she could find it? She took her daughter's side against the teacher. I followed over the years that little 5th grade girl. She's had nothing but problems in her life. Now, it wasn't just because of that grade. It was because of how mom was rearing her daughter. Listen, stand with authority. Now, by the way, if you don't be surprised if your child does not respect you, because you've taught them how to be disrespectful. I've told y'all the story about one time I got 3 licks in school, and honestly, I didn't do what they said they thought I did. So I went home and told my daddy. Now, I don't know if my dad ever called the teacher and talked to him or not. As far as I know, after all these years, he didn't. Now, if he did, I never knew it. You know what my daddy said? That probably makes up for some time you did something wrong, didn't get caught, don't you think? My dad didn't even have a 9th grade education, but he had wisdom. He had wisdom. Number 2, you want to raise a rebel? Let them see you violating Scriptures. None of us are perfect. But when your child sees you flagrantly disobeying Scripture, they know that you really don't believe what you're teaching them. And they will be disrespectful to you and to other leaders. I was dealing with a couple, a husband and a son, a father and a son years ago. And the dad had brought his son to see me, and he said, I caught him looking at a pornographic magazine. I looked at the boy and I said, son, you're a minor. Where'd you get that? Under Daddy's mattress. That dad had no influence over that boy about morals and morality. Number 3, when they feel their parents do not love one another. My mom and dad were of the generation that to outwardly express love, it wasn't a taboo, it just wasn't done. The whole time I was growing up, I never saw my dad hold my mother's hand. I never saw my dad hug my mother. I never saw him kiss her, even on the forehead. I never saw that. Now, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. If Wynn and Vonda were sitting here right now, they would have to say, ooh, that wasn't true at our house. Sometimes I'd come in, I'd kiss their mama, and I'd hear Vonda, oh, Daddy. Y'all hearing what I'm saying? You know what she thinks about it now? Daddy knew what he was doing. Hello? Never a day went by that several times in the day I told my wife I loved her. If we had had cell phones that had texting on it, I would have texted her several times a day, just say, hey, I want you to know I was thinking about you and I love you. I do that to my daughter and my daughter-in-law and my granddaughters. Now, my grandsons, I tell them I wished I was there and shake their hand. You know, boys don't like for Grandpa to say, I love you. But I do when I'm with them. It's amazing when you and I recognize they need to see and to know that we love each other. It's amazing, but the seeds that breed insecurity runs extremely deep in the heart of a child. And especially when they do not feel that mom and dad love each other. Now let me say this, and please take this in the way I'm saying it from my heart. If you have problems in your marriage, determine you're going to work it out. I don't care what it takes, you work it out. And again, when I've spoken on family, you've heard me say that so many times I've dealt with couples over the years and they come and they say, we just don't love each other. My question to them is, are you born again? Are you saved? Yes, yes. Then that's not an option God gives you. God commands us to love one another. What they're usually saying is, the heat's gone out of our relationship. We don't feel it anymore. Well, faith it then. Don't let your problems get to the place that you think they're insurmountable. Ask for pastoral counseling. I don't care how hard the situation is or how deep your hurt runs. It can be worked out. If Christ, for God's sake, forgave you, you can forgive anybody of anything. Name it, you can forgive it. No matter how many times, if you have problems in your marriage and you say to your child, I just want you to know it's not your fault. You listen to me. I don't know how many times I've met with teenagers and they've blamed themselves because of a broken marriage or because of a bad marriage. And you know and I know it's not the child's fault. And I don't care how many times you tell them that, they'll never believe you. They may say they do, but they don't. Make sure that you show each other that you love each other. Number 4. They will turn out to be a rebel when you don't when you don't discipline for disobedience. When your son or your daughter disobeys the rules that you've laid out, when let's say they break curfew, when they're hanging around the wrong teenagers, and you do nothing about it in a consistent way, they learn not to respect what you say. There were times that I just told Wynn he couldn't go to a Baylor game with certain boys. Why? I'd already dealt with those boys about things that they had done that they shouldn't be doing. Did you tell him what they were doing? No, it wasn't his business. His business was to do what his daddy said. And you need to teach your children. Now listen to this. You're wiser than they are. You've been down the road further than they've been down the road. I'm not going to say you're smarter than they are because kids are so stinking smart now. But you ought to be wiser than they are. I remember hearing an old country preacher. He was a great preacher, Dr. B.R. Lake. And he was talking to a young preacher, and he was talking about how good a preacher he was and everything. Dr. Lakin looked at him, and he said, "Son, I've been under the house gathering eggs further than you've been away from home." You know what he's saying? I'm wiser than you are. I'm wiser than you are. Number 5. When you reward them materially in spite of bad behavior. I don't know how many times over the years I've dealt with moms and dads who have the idea, you know, if I just keep giving things to my child, he'll really love me. That's a lie. You cannot buy a child's love. Listen to me. You can't buy a child's respect. You earn it. You can't even demand it in reality. You can demand they're not disrespectful, but you earn respect. Too many parents, I'm afraid, also have the philosophy, if I don't buy him or her what they want, here, I get kicked out. We'll lose our relationship. You can't. You're always the daddy. You're always the mother. They're always a child. You can't lose that relationship. What you're saying is, they won't like me like I want them to like me. Now, I'm going to say something, and I want you to remember this. If you don't remember anything else, develop the attitude that you would rather your child respect you as to like you. Let me say that again. Develop the attitude you'd rather your child respect you as to like you. I had that attitude with my wife before she became my wife, that I would rather her respect me as to love me. Because if she respects me, I can gain her love. If she doesn't respect me, there's no way I can gain her love. Same is true with children. Don't reward them materially for bad behavior. And I'll be honest with you, a parent that does that's just lazy. They don't want to work at being a good parent. Number 6, when they are compensated materially by parents who pity them. Now listen to me very carefully. We ought to give our children gifts. I love to give my children gifts. I enjoyed that when they were little, when they were teenagers, when they were young adults. I love to surprise them with gifts. We should always try to help our children when there is a true need. But don't get in the habit of bailing your children out over and over and over again. They have to stand sometime on their own 2 feet. Now, none of y'all have ever heard this. This is folks that aren't here tonight. But it's amazing when we don't allow our children to pay the penalty for when they do wrong. You know, if they're out and they're driving and they get a speeding ticket, somehow they ought to pay it. Now, they may not have the money to do it before they're supposed to go to jail for it. I'd suggest paying it. But it would be on a payout plan. You're going to pay me back for this. And by the way, I think it's good if children have have an allowance. I think that's good. Teach them how to take care of money, how to budget their money. By the way, though, don't pay your son to take the trash out. He ought to do that because he's part of the family. Why? Part of that trash went in there is his. Don't pay your children to do the dishes. Well, let me back up. Don't pay them to put them in the dishwasher. You know, things that they ought to do because they're part of the family ought to be because they're part of the family. But they ought to have an allowance. And out of that allowance, you teach them to tithe. You teach them to support missions. And as they get older, you increase that so they can learn that good behavior brings rewards. Bad behavior, you hold their allowance. When Vonda was growing up, Virginia and I found out real quick, talking to her just really didn't help a whole lot. Taking her money away killed her soul. I mean, it started out, she got 5 pennies a week when she was little. Virginia, if she disobeyed or something, she'd go in there and take a penny away. And by the way, she didn't get it back. Why? Because she can't take that disrespect back. She can't take that disobedience back. That's a penalty. Now, next week, she got her 5 pennies. If she did the same thing, then she lost 2 of them. That girl learned quick. It's easier to obey. It's easier to obey. We should give our children gifts. We ought to help them when they have a real need, but don't keep bailing them out of their trouble. I'm afraid what happens is many times our children will learn to look at us as a financial source that they can manipulate rather than you and me being a loving provider and teacher. Last of all, you'll raise a rebel when they are allowed to participate in activities which they are told they would not enjoy unless they obeyed. We're going to have ice cream after this. If you disobey, you're not going to get an ice cream. Don't give them ice cream. I remember, I've said this years and years ago, but I remember, and I don't know where Virginia got this, but the children, have you ever seen a child in a store throw a fit? Boy, I was in a store one time years ago, and this little boy, he was in the basket, but he held his breath and his face turned red. And his mother said, okay, I'll give it to you. I'll get it. And I thought, you are crazy. Well, he could die. No, he'll pass out. And when he passes out, he starts breathing. It's a natural reflex. Virginia had a rule with Wynn and Vonda. If you throw a fit for something in the store or any time, hell will freeze over before you'll get it. They understood. You pitch a fit, that thing's gone forever. If it's in January, you don't get it Christmas. It's gone forever. You know what? Vonda and Wynn did that with their kids. Don't throw a fit. Don't throw a fit. Now, if they do, promise them when we get home and away from snooping eyes, I'm going to wear the seat of your britches out. You're not going to. And by the way, as I said a week or so ago, don't discipline them because they embarrass you. Discipline them because what they did violated the family rule. That's why you get it. Our children need us to hold firm boundaries. And I think there can be occasions for mercy, but you should not give in over and over because they're going to lose their respect for you, but most importantly, they'll lose their respect for God. if God's rules don't change, yours and I ought to be steadfast. If you don't hold the line consistently, but you give in over and over, they're going to lose respect for you. Let me just close with this. If your child is having trouble with obeying, don't take them out of church as punishment. You know, if they're having trouble, more than likely, being in our youth program, they're going to hear things from the Word of God that may touch their heart and help them to do what they're supposed to do. I dealt with a dad about 2 years ago, and he told me, he said, well, the only thing I can take away from is the youth activities. I didn't say it, I bit my lip this time. But I wanted to think, surely you're not that ignorant. Brother Doug preaches as hard to those young people and straight to them about loving you and obeying you and doing what you say. You need that help out there. And if you just insist to do that, bring them in here and make them sit with you. Because when I see a teenager in here with you, I'll know you need help, and I'll jump on it that night. Boy, listen. I never enjoyed disciplining my children. You heard me say this, and I mean it. I cannot remember a time that I had to spank Win or Vonda that I didn't cry myself. And I promise you this, parent. If you will do it lovingly and consistently and start when they're young, you won't have to do it long. Now again, there's always the exception to the rule. But I've seen this over and over and over again. See, part of the problems children have now is that in most time, they're not really made to obey in school. You know why? Because the school's afraid of mom and dad. They're afraid of a lawsuit. We had a boy not too long ago accused Brother Joey of years ago when Brother Joey coached football here that he abused him. I told Brother Joey he should have had coaches like I had when I was in high school if he wanted to talk about abuse. Our baseball coach, old Mr. Coach Stringer, he's an old guy. He was the shop teacher too. And he took a Louisville Slugger and cut that thing flat, and that was his paddle. You ever been whipped with a Louisville Slugger baseball bat? Now, I'm going to tell you something. A lot of times I got licks and it didn't really hurt that much. Not O.D. Stringer. Boy, I behaved when I was around him. Why? Watch it. I respected him. I respected my dad. Probably ought to say I respect what held his britches up. That belt. But you love your children. You discipline them in love. And let me remind you, always leave time to love them back. Always. And let me just throw this out. I know I'm going over time. Once a child has paid the price for disobedience, never bring that up again. What if they do the same thing again? Then take care of that. Don't take care of this back up. That's already been taken care of. God doesn't even bring it up anymore. You and I shouldn't either. Why? That child's going to think, I can never outlive this. Because Daddy keeps bringing up 6 months ago. No, if the price is paid, it's in the past. Don't bring it up. Don't ever allude to it. Don't ever say, you did that again? No. Just say, look what you did. Go through talk to them, explain the rule again, do what you have to do. But the main thing I want you to learn tonight is you moms and you dads agree. Be together. Whatever you choose to do, be together. Bill Rice III told me one time he and Pete did something. And Dr. Rice took Bill and Miss Rice took Pete. Right there in the same room was Miss Rice was spanking Pete. Bill III was being spanked by his dad. He said, then they swapped. He said, I thought we never were going to get over that whipping. Now, I don't suggest you do that. Don't tag team them. But make sure you do it right. And make sure that the discipline is strong enough that what they did to have it wasn't worth it. There's an easier way to live than disobedience. God bless you.